This episode with Carl Paoli was actually my second episode with him. So on this one, we dove into some specific topics. We talked about connection, community, communication. We talked about that feeling of loneliness when not many people share your values. We talked about the phrase, good people are hard to come by. We talked about integrity, authenticity. We talked about staying positive during a holiday when you were unemployed. We talked about just staying positive in general in the weird backwards way that we get to that process. But naturally, we did ramble a little bit and we did kind of go off on a few tangents. And you're not going to know how it went unless you listen to it. And so I hope that you do. And I hope that you share it with a friend. And thank you very much for supporting the Lifestyle Chase. Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase, Season 2. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. I'm your host, Chris Little. Let's get started. The Lifestyle Chase is brought to you by Yeg Fitness. Yeg Fitness is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's healthy lifestyle community, creating and supporting active living for all. Check them out online at yegfitness.ca and on social media at yegfitness. So welcome to episode 89 of the Lifestyle Chase. I've brought back the one and only Carl Paoli. The last time that I had him on was episode 71, October 7th. So a lot of time has passed. How's life been the last couple months?
Yeah, I think the last time we spoke, I was in the middle of a massive transition, and now I'm kind of on the other side, finishing up the year, feeling good. Yeah, focusing on some new projects and feeling excited.
So I've been watching, you've been doing your Carl's Coffee Club, and that's something that I like that. I like the idea. I think it's a good initiative. What are three things that you've really taken away from that experience?
Yeah, number one, people want to connect. It's super simple, but people need it. Number two, when people connect, they want to connect in person. There's something about being face to face and in real time that really brings out the most genuine side of someone. And then the third thing I would say that consistency is the top priority if you want to develop something. An example of this is in the beginning, I was just kind of doing this coffee club for fun, and once I was on rep 5 or 6, I started saying, well, I could just do it next week instead of this week. And having these thoughts of wanting to postpone it, but realizing that it was important to just stick with it. And the fact that I've stuck with it is now starting to reveal some things that I didn't know Coffee Club was going to bring, which is these really exciting, cool conversations that go beyond what I had originally set out to do. So consistency, I think, is massive.
What are three things that you've learned about yourself during that process? Like these last few months of like connecting with maybe some people that you hadn't seen in a while and some people that you've never met before. What have you learned about yourself?
Yeah, I think the number one thing would be that I don't have to try that hard. I don't I don't have to try to be the guy who knows something, or I just have to be there, and your presence alone is enough. The other thing that it's not that I've learned, but I've been reminded of is that when you're interested, when you're genuinely interested in something or someone, uh, people start to share some beautiful and meaningful things. So interest is important, and curiosity. And I guess the third thing that I've learned about myself in this process is that I have so much more left in the tank and so much more to explore, which has me feeling equally excited and scared shitless.
That's an
It's
awesome
cool.
way to put it. That's good. You talk about connection and being like interested and like really like being invested in other people. How do you navigate that personally? Like I know in my own experience, we come across all kinds of people, and sometimes it seems initially that a large group of people is interested or invested, and then we learn that maybe it's not such a large group of people. How do you navigate that personally?
Could you reframe that question? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to exactly in terms of navigation.
Well, essentially, just people tend to feel like they need to please everybody, or it's that whole that needing to be liked, or maybe they feel that they had the greater support of a larger audience, and then they realize it's like quality over quantity. And I think that everybody is susceptible to feel self-conscious in that way at some point in their life, and I'm just kind of curious how that journey is like for you.
Yeah, I could take this in many different directions, but it makes sense now that you reframed it. So thank you for that. Let's go into the deep end of the pool. Here's a little quote for you, which is those who have no preferences have an easy time going through the great way of life, which basically means that if you're not clinging on to any desires or any expectations or anything that you're even thinking, any thoughts, all of a sudden everything becomes easy. And it's being able to let go of any expectation in terms of how people perceive you or even talk about you or understand you that allows you to just be yourself. And it's difficult because sometimes we have an agenda, we have a desire, we believe we have some sort of yearning to something that maybe doesn't even exist, and that's when things get complicated. But I think that's the beauty of it, is that we act according to our desires, and then our actions have natural consequences. It either brings us closer together, it stays neutral, or it brings us apart. And either way, everything is fine if you're willing to see it that way.
I think that's a great way to answer it. Like with today's episode, it's kind of cool because for the last 2 weeks, I've been quizzing a lot of my Instagram followers, and it's just a lot of people that I've seen maybe several times a week, and I feel like this close connection. And it's been really cool to learn more about them and what their ebbs and flows and their struggles are. And then in this way, we get to kind of dive down the rabbit hole in things that people are seeking answers to. And I found that over the last year, in all these conversations that I've had on the podcast, I've really recognized myself just how much connection is like imperative to our like just sustainability in our day-to-day lives. On that topic, what has been a connection that you've made in the year 2019? We're like wrapping up the year. What's a connection that you've made that you feel will last a long time for you? Just like maybe it has a story to it or a lesson that it's taught you.
Well, there are several that come to mind, but I would say one connection, not that I made this year, I actually made it last year, but it's with a woman by the name of Olga Ponomarenko. She is a used to be a personal trainer and coach, and she attended one of my seminars in New Jersey last year in 2018. And then she came to one of my events that I hosted in London, and I also got a chance to coach her on a one-on-one basis. And she moved from Boston to San Francisco to one, change her career as a fitness professional and to become a photographer and videographer, and to also work with me. And one of the most interesting things that has happened in that relationship, and this is something that I think people will be able to relate to, is that the closer she came to being around me in my circle, the more she realized that I was just a dude trying to figure it out, which is something I've always said, but people most mostly in the circle where people know me for my work, they don't want to believe that. They want to they want to believe that, okay, this guy must know something because he's achieved X, Y, and Z, and those are things that I desire. Uh, but then when you come close to the fire, you realize, oh, wait a second, the fire is kind of hot, and it's a little messy, and it's kind of dangerous. And yeah, we kind of clashed a little bit because there must have been a lot of dissonance for her, and even me knowing it and prefacing that this was potentially going to happen, when it happened, it just was one of those moments where you could just choose to kind of sweep it under the rug or address it head on. And we were able to address it head on and have a very difficult conversation around who we are as a team and collaborators. And we've transcended the original connection that we made into this new level. And one of the things that was very interesting, this was a comment she made. She said, "Carl, I'm no longer your fan." And I said, well, I'm glad that's the case, because if you were, you'd be a fanatic. And I want you to be a person that I can talk to and communicate with and have rapport with. And yeah, just this week we got a chance to wrap up a great podcast episode with someone that I admire very much, and she was able to get involved with it and help me produce it. And man, here we are doing it. So I think that's one of the most meaningful connections of this year, and something that is going to last a long time.
I like that, and I like that you talked about communication, because I think when you talked about being willing to have those difficult conversations, I think that's an important topic for our episode today. So when a person is in that standstill moment where they're wondering, what do we do next? Do we walk away or do we lean into it? Like, what kind of advice do you have for them for having those difficult conversations?
Yeah, I would say lean into it. It's always going to tell you the truth, but know when you're leaning in, when to back off. And what I mean by that is that when you lean into a conversation, I think what I'm suggesting here is that you have that conversation. And sometimes having that conversation doesn't mean you trying to be understood, but rather seeking to understand, which is something a lot of people are familiar with. But when it's time to execute, that can easily go out the door. So, yeah, uh, leaning into that conversation, and then noticing that if something's coming up, or if it's getting a little emotional or aggressive or whatever, to let it breathe. And sometimes the best way to have a conversation is in silence, but simply sharing the space, and then being able to afterwards decide logically and in alignment with how you feel emotionally, how to proceed.
I like that. Perfect answer. One of my next questions that I've derived from the Instagram was a feeling of loneliness when not so many people share your values. Like when somebody experiences that, and it's because maybe they feel that certain things are important. Maybe they have a certain set of core values that they have trouble finding other people that share those things. What advice do you have for them based on like things that have happened for you personally?
Yeah, I think that's where going inward is extremely important. So having somewhat of a meditation practice or a physical practice that allows you to spend time with yourself and getting to know uh, what your thoughts look like, what emotions come with those thoughts, and what feelings are there, uh, are extremely important, because that's when you start to find uh, solace in solitude, and realizing that even though you may be physically alone, you are consciously not. There's this sense of peace there. And if you as an individual are clinging on to the idea of having to be understood or your values to be shared, uh, then that's the work that you have to do. It's you have to let go of people thinking and believing the way that you think and believe. And I can give you an example. For me, I grew up going to Catholic school. I grew up in Spain, and my family is not religious, nor do we practice. Most people would label me as an atheist, although I don't consider myself that necessarily. So when people would say something like "God bless you" to me as a younger teenager or in my 20s, I would be very dismissive. But it was in my later years where I was able to uh, hear what they were saying beyond the words. And when you can hear what people are saying beyond the words and translate it into just the basic human condition and experience and reflect it inward, all of a sudden you're able to hear people, whether they come from a different belief system than you or not.
I think that's a perfect way to answer it because, like myself personally, I'm surrounded by a lot of different culture and a lot of different ethnicity, and so it's like it's a given. There's going to be all kinds of different celebrations, all kinds of different holidays, and when somebody is like giving you their greeting, whether it be like Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or whatever it may be, it's not them forcing their beliefs on you. It's them sharing something meaningful as like a gesture of good faith towards you, and I think that's a great reflection to have.
Yeah, and I think it's simply a reminder of how limited we are by the language we speak. And if you think about that, you also start realizing that one type of language, the verbal language that we speak right now, we're speaking English, and in context of a certain culture, for example, that we must realize that there are other languages involved as well: the physical language, the emotional language, our business language, the craft language. And if we can bring all of those together and be able to distill the essence of the message, that's when I think we start to hear what we need to hear, not what we want to hear.
I think that's important, and since we're talking about connection and community and just communication and all that stuff, when it comes to language in whatever way you express it, whether it's words or actions, what is something that you intend to instill into your everyday going into 2020?
That's a great question. Well, I see 2020 without it being intending a pun here. I see 2020 as a year of clarity. That's just so 2020 vision, a year of clarity. And I think I personally find clarity when I have chosen to act in a certain way. So for me, one of my actions for 2020, which has already started, uh, is simply being able to do less. And I know that when I do less, I always historically it's been correct. I'm always able to achieve more. And what I mean by doing less is simply not trying so hard to fit in, not trying so hard to arrive at this imaginary destination that I have. Simply doing the things that I think of our how am I not getting this that are of value, and doing it in a way that feels good. Yeah, and I think that's the intention is to do less and to feel good doing it.
That's a great way to put it. Um, for yourself, what are three things that you're excited about when because you're starting up your podcast again, you're kind of getting into your passion, you're leaning into things. What are three things that you're excited about when it comes to that?
Well, specifically the podcast, I think I'm excited about the opportunity that exists, just like this. What is happening right now is to be able to have these types of conversations with people that I'm interested in. And the other thing is the technical aspect of producing a podcast or a show, and to just know that there's an infinite ways of spinning a podcast, and that to me is fun because the final destination is not the podcast. The podcast is just a vehicle to practice finding my voice. So yeah, those are a couple things that I'm excited about. And then I guess what comes with it is this sense of belonging where I really enjoy listening to conversation. I feel like I'm sitting at the table in a special room, and it's fun. It just feels special.
That's awesome. Are there projects aside from like you do mentorship, you do sort of like business coaching? I hate the term business coaching because it's gotten such a bad reputation, but you do very wholesome business coaching. Is there other things that you're kind of like taking on in the new year? Are there big hairy audacious goals?
I mean, I think the hairy, audacious goal is simply deciding to not focus on fitness as my profession this year and have fitness be more of my vocation, while my profession at the moment may look like business or personal development, but at the same time building something that's a little bit bigger than that. And I don't know if it's a company that maybe sells a product of some sort or something completely different. I'm open to that, and I feel like 2020 will reveal that, and I'm excited for that.
That's perfect. So when I use the phrase good people are hard to come by, what are the first thoughts that come to your mind? What are like maybe you've learned in your lifetime some things associated with that, or maybe it's just your take on that phrase, or really you can take it anywhere you want to go.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is behavior, but I know a lot of people who have poor behavior and are great people. So the first thing that comes to mind is that if good people are hard to come by or to find, you're probably not looking in the right places.
I like that. That's wise. That's so wise. So for yourself, where have the right places been? Because I know for me, I've found a lot of places, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the right place, and it's like, oh no, that's not the right place. This other place is the right place, and it's like we just it's like throwing spaghetti at the fridge. We don't know unless we see what sticks, kind of thing. That's one of my favorite analogies to use lately.
hmm I mean, if you think that there are almost 8 billion people walking the planet Earth right now, and you think about each person being an opportunity for a relationship, there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of people out there to choose from. But you are only one person, and you are here right now. This room right now is empty, the room that I'm in, but I'm here with you. So you're my only option. And it happens to be that you're here in this very moment, right now, no one else, just you and me. So if you're my only option, it is really up to me to make sure that I find what is good in this relationship, what is good in the person that I'm relating to. Uh, and this happens as you kind of go about your day. When you step outside, if you start looking around, if you're in a city like I am in San Francisco, there's a lot of people. Uh, but regardless, if you start looking around and as soon as you start making eye contact, those are the people that you're selecting. And if you choose to engage in a conversation with them, that's where going back to what we were talking about earlier, exercising a little bit of curiosity and interest in them can elicit some very powerful conversations, regardless of uh, whether you define them as being quote unquote good people or bad people.
That was a great way to segue it because like in a lot of instances my takeaway in situations has been like if you are not able to see the good in all people, like what is your view of yourself? Like if all we see is bad in ourselves, we're going to be really easy at recognizing bad in others. But if we're seeing the good in ourselves, if we've had that time to have some self reflection, then we're more equipped to see the good in other people. Have you ever had a time in your life when you've kind of struggled to see the good?
Every day. Every day, all the time. I'm judging, 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 and of course I'm judging myself. Uh, yeah, every day. So that's something I have to work on at. And but the beauty of it is that the older I get, and it's not that I'm super old, but I'm approaching 40 or whatever. The older I get, the slower these emotions or feelings or thoughts come to me. So I get to see them coming, and I say, "Oh, look, there comes judgment." And it just kind of gives me some time, and what ends up happening is that instead of being really reactive, I become more responsive, or I simply say, okay, well, hold back a second, let judgment pass, and let's see what's behind it. And it usually what comes from a more negative feeling or a more negative thought is usually something that has to do with yourself, and that's when introspection or going within yourself is very powerful. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and this doesn't just happen with people. This also happens with your physical experiences. I mean, if you're in fitness and you're training, for example, and something starts to feel uncomfortable, and you start to maybe react to it. For example, I detest squatting. Okay, it's something I dread doing. My little legs just do not like that. Okay, they don't like squatting. Uh, I know it's just a story I'm telling myself, and I even told it out loud, but it's a total lie.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's just a story that has become a belief system, and that's something I have to work on changing. And the way that I can respond to that is by saying, okay, well, how can I squat in a way that feels good? And that would be my practice.
it's so true, and it's ironic because like I enjoy deadlifting, but I'm just like kind of indifferent to squatting. But then the thing was, I was telling myself that I wasn't squatting. I was like, I never squat. I don't squat, so I don't know what's wrong with me. I should be squatting more. But then I looked at the variations I was doing. I was like, well, I totally squat. I just don't do a lot of barbell squats, but I'll do a goblet squat. I can do a split squat. I can do all kinds of different squats, and it's
Hmm.
that whole self reflection. You get people who are overcoming injuries that are like, well, I can't do this, and it's like, well, you can do it. It just you need to modify it, and then you can do it. And it's just that you never thought about how you could modify it, or never looked deeper into the modifications that you can do, so that you can do that too. And then all of a sudden, you can walk around and be like, I can do that, no problem.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we're an interesting species for sure.
So the next topic, I'm just gonna like sprinkle topics at you today. The
Yeah,
next
hit
topic
me, hit
is
me.
in an interview setting. Like, say you're starting your day and you have 5 interviews ahead of you, and each interview is on a completely different topic. What How are you going to go into that situation? Are you going to put equal energy into every interview? Are you going to assess your situation and pick one over the other? Are you going to have some kind of like uniformity so that every interview gets equal energy? Like, because at the end of the day, like, you only have so much time in your day, so you gotta choose a fork in the road.
Yeah, so number one, the intention remains the same throughout the 5 episodes or 5 interviews I do, right? That doesn't change. The intention is always to uh, be of service in some way by holding space so people can share their stories, to guide their thoughts, and then maybe reflect them back at them so they can uh, reframe or rearticulate what they're trying to convey. So the intention would remain the same. The energy would be different for each interview because one has to either set the tone for what the energy is going to be like for the session or for the interview, or adapt to the person that you have in front of you. and you won't know what that is until you get in the room. So,
So I
that,
gotta
yeah, the energy fluctuates.
for this particular segue, we're talking job interview. So
Job interview. Okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
if I'm trying to get a job, well, I haven't interviewed in a long time, but if I were to, am I being interviewed to get a job?
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Well, yeah, I think I would do actually the same thing. My intention is to be as simple, clear, and compelling as I can be to convey the value and the asset I can be for the company or organization, and to simply listen to what the interviewer is saying and asking, and yeah, trying to be very clear about my intentions. That would be it, and the energy would once again also adapt to the person interviewing me.
So we're gonna add another layer to this whole question here. I'm going to give you examples of like we'll just break it down to three to simplify things for thinking purposes. But the one job is you're going to be a professional baker. That's what the job interview is for. And you can just pretend you're yourself to answer these questions. You don't have to pretend you're someone with previous baking experience. So the next example is going to be you're going to be a professional bodybuilder. And then the third example is you are going to be a librarian. And those are your three. And that's what you're faced with in your day. And then how will you approach that? They all have equal pay and they all give you the equal hours, and it's just you have to decide how you will allocate your energy and what intent you'll go into each situation.
Yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to adaptability. I would have to convey the message that I am adaptable, meaning that I can learn on the fly. I'm willing to be reflective. I'm willing to go through some discomfort, and with that, always demonstrate progress. And I think that would be the approach. That would be the intention.
I like it. It's good. It's neat because it's kind of like it's a test. I'm like, is he going to be like, well, no, I have no intent to be a bodybuilder. So it's like I would have to do some self reflection. Do I want to be a bodybuilder? Is this something that I want to spend my time going forward into? And then I didn't know if you like baking or if you don't like baking. And then the third one is librarian, and that's the one where I was putting my cards on librarian. I was like, of all these three, like maybe he would like baking, but maybe he would like librarian because he's like an intellect. He would thrive in that area and be able to communicate, and those are things that are important to him. It's kind of like diving down the rabbit hole, helping people with their soul searching process.
Yeah, I don't think most of us have the opportunity to choose what we get to be necessarily. And just the fact that we can sit here and dream about, oh, what could we be? You know, librarian, bodybuilder, or baker. I mean, that just puts us in a position where our level of privilege is through the roof. So I assume that we don't get to choose. This is what we got. This is the life. So let's take the curriculum.
That's awesome.
And while we do it, how are we going to do it?
That's a good way to spin it. Do you have an instance in your life when you felt you've really like taken on that curriculum and like how it sort of made you shift or maybe pivot in your life?
Well, you know, I I've had extreme privilege in my life, so I've always had options. And although I know people who haven't had the options, um, no matter how much empathy or compassion I exercise, I can't fully put myself in their shoes. I just can't. So I can only listen uh, and try to align it with my experiences, but I can never know what it's like to be someone in that position. But what I have done is I have put myself in positions where uh, I've had to stretch myself and been open to climbing a ladder. So, for example, when I came out of college, I studied environmental science. I spent 40 hours a week volunteering, interning actually, uh, trying to uh, potentially get a job or get some experience. And then on top of those 40 hours, I was selling tickets in a ticket booth on my own for an aquarium. And then I worked my way up the ranks of becoming an educator and a teacher within the world of marine biology. And I was working my way up the ranks like that. And doing jobs I didn't like, but I could see how these steps, and each one of them was teaching me something that at the end of the day was going to serve me. And even though I'm not even in the field of marine biology, everything I learned through choosing going down that path of selling tickets or working in an elevator, pressing the buttons to send people up and down uh, through a museum, I carry those values and those principles with me, and those lessons now, and what I do every day. So that's something that I do appreciate, and uh, I can feel proud of, and leverage as experience.
I think that's some good reflection right there, which kind of almost mirrors the next thing that I was going to ask. But it's essentially like you've had so many different passions throughout your life. You've really dove down with gymnastics, being a high performer within that realm. You've done your seminars, and you've done so many cool things so far in your life. Have you ever had a moment where you're like, it's over, that's, I've closed the book with that, and then found out like maybe 2 or 3 years later that you were totally wrong and that book never actually closes?
Yeah, I think we have to say that a book closes or a chapter is over simply to put it in a little box and compartmentalize it. Although we know in the back of our head that it's never over. An example right now, I have transitioned out of coaching in the fitness space, but just this morning, I opened up my DMs and Instagram, and I had a few messages, and I started going through them, and several of them were related to fitness, and a lot of them made me feel like, oh man, my job in the fitness space is not over. These people still don't get it. But then I realized, okay, I'm going to respond to this, but I know that my job in the fitness space is not over, meaning I want to work with the leaders that are in the fitness space that are currently hungry to solve the problems that are currently present there, and for me to help direct them in a way that can be conducive for growth in the fitness space, and for the individuals participating either as leaders or students.
That's a great way to put it. And with your analogy of like compartmentalizing things, like when we compartmentalize things, in my experience, and basically my take on it is essentially it's kind of like you have this bright light that's kind of shone light on your days for a long time to come. It kind of felt like it would never you would never have to close that off, and then it's like dark, and then it's like, what do you do next? What would be your best example of like the light that came that you were just you did not see that coming? You had ideas of what would happen, but then something else just came out of nowhere and it happened instead, and it was brighter, perhaps brighter than what you just closed off.
Hmm. I mean, me being a coach in the fitness space, I never thought I was going to do that. That was just not in the cards for me, I believed. And then all of a sudden, I started coaching a little gymnastics because it was easy money. And 15 years later, here I am. I've spent a long portion of my life dedicated to coaching and traveling the world doing this thing. That's cool. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that chapter was over when I retired from gymnastics in the year 2000. But we're in 2019, and I never left, even though I did a bunch of other things.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, so
perfect.
that's an example. And then in relationship to compartmentalizing, I mean, even you and I having a conversation here, every time you ask me something, I kind of have to choose where I anchor my thought process. So I'm compartmentalizing there, but as soon as I'm done with it, it kind of falls back into this like infinite sphere of just mush.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's almost
So,
like a
yeah,
beehive, and we're picking from different sections of the beehive, and then it just goes back, and it's like honey. The mush is
yeah,
honey.
yeah, yeah. It's all honey. Yum, yum, yum.
So I read somewhere that the word of 2019 is integrity. And what is your experience, or what is your stance on that word? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, integrity is an impossible thing because if integrity is something that you stick to, that means that it's something that you believe in, is something that you stick to. That means that you're limited. So you're constantly stretching what integrity is, and as you stretch it, you're breaking it, and when you're breaking it, you are reconstructing and building it. So integrity sounds to me stagnant. And although I want to have integrity and want to make sure that people know what my values and principles are, and that if you're with me, I'm a reliable person. I know that I'm messing up all the time, and I'm constantly having to bend my integrity in order to find where the edges of my growth are. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing to say that 2019 is about integrity, but man, I don't know if I've had that.
Well, I mean, like, if that's not an honest self assessment, I don't know what is. Like, it is. It's empowering to be like, I do things with integrity, and a lot of people that I care about quite dearly have been doing things with integrity. But then when we do some soul searching, and we're like, well, how has the year 2019 been? Like, did we know everything, or did we not know everything and have to like push on the edges? Yeah, it's so true. That's such a great way to kind of sum it up.
Yeah, and a lot of people, if you were to look at my path throughout 2019, a lot of people, if they were to look at what I've done, they would be like, "Oh man, Carl really operated with integrity." And others may have said, "You know what? Carl had no integrity here, and he just went off the rails. What happened?" I feel good, and I
Yeah.
feel right, and I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm trying in a way that feels effortless right now, and that's pretty remarkable that that's even possible.
Well, I mean, that's important to talk about because, like, even myself, sometimes I'll like wake up in the morning and I'll be like, I'm a good guy. I do nice things. Like, people would probably think that I do things with integrity, but always, 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 there's gonna be somebody out there that's like, man, that Chris Little, he's a piece of shit. Like,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
gotta like accept it and don't really worry about it. It's just like you said. It's kind of like if it if what we do feels right to us, and if it feels sort of like effortless, like if we have to put in a lot of effort to be ourselves, we're not really being ourselves. But if we don't have to put in too much effort to be ourselves, then we're at least following our path of what we deem to be like genuine. And I guess I'll use the other word, authentic. That was another very commonly used word.
Mm. Mm. Authentic.
What's your stance on that word? Looks like I fired you
I,
up a little bit.
yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's cool. Uh, if you're trying to be authentic, it means that you are trying to be yourself. If you're trying to be yourself, you're trying to be the person who you think you are. And one thing that we are constantly reminded of, if we pay any attention, is that we are not who we think we are. Thus, we are not authentic.
Damn, that was deep. So I have another question for you that comes from the list from Instagram, and it's how do you stay positive during a holiday if like you're gonna have to put yourself maybe in somebody else's shoes, or maybe transfer this to an example that you have, but like say you were unemployed during a holiday season, or you're just like you have no reason to be positive and you feel the desire to be positive. How do you do that personally?
Once again, I am in such a position of privilege that I have no business even reflecting on what someone who is in that position should do. That being said, I know what I can do, and I'll give you an example. I'm out in the middle of the night walking my dog. It's pitch dark and it's raining. I walk around the corner here, just around the block here from my house, And in a little nook, there is the homeless man with his cart and his stuff. And my dog decides to pee pretty close to where he's about to sleep. So I apologize, of course, profusely, and he says, "Don't worry." And I said, "Okay." I said, and I started walking away. And I turned around and I said, uh, "Do you need anything? Is there anything I can get you?" He's like, "Do you have a cigarette?" And I said, "No, sorry." He says, "Do you have a quarter?" And I was like, "Nope, don't have any change on me." So I asked him, "Are you hungry?" He's like, "Yes, very hungry." "Is there anything else you need?" He's like, "Do you have a book, a fiction book? I love fiction." I was like, "Well, let me check. I live right around the corner." So I finish walking my dog. I go up and I tell Tanya, I was like, "Hey, do we have some soup that we can heat up?" So heat up the soup, chicken noodle soup, put a little, some cookies in there, two fiction books, uh, and I had some change. I had like $7 or something. And I walk down. I go back to this guy and I say, "Hey, it's me. I'm back." And I give him the stuff. And he was so thankful. He cried. Uh, we had a little conversation, and he said, "Today's been a good day." He was soaking wet. He was like, "Today's been a good day. People are really have really been supportive of me today, and I'm really grateful for that." And I said, "Well, I'm glad that's the case, and I hope you can have a good night." Uh, and he said, "Yeah, I will." And he started eating his food, and I said, "I'll let you finish your dinner." I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "My name is Jack." And I said, "My name is Carl." And I said, "I'm right around the corner. Hopefully, uh, I'll see you around. And if not, happy holidays, and stay dry, whatever." I walk away, and I'm walking towards my house. And as I'm walking, of course, I feel this immense sense of just overwhelming satisfaction. And of course, part of it is my ego just being like, "Look what I did. I helped this student." Uh, but I only did one little thing. But once I got over the satisfaction that came with my ego there, and I just kind of let that pass and let go of it, I walked up the stairs. I walked into our apartment, and Tanya was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'll be fine." I was like, "I'm just gonna go take a shower." So I went, took a shower, and yeah, I basically cried for 20 minutes because it was such a powerful moment. And the reason I'm sharing this is not to showcase how awesome I am and how kind I am and compassionate. It's more so just to say that if you can, if you're in a position where you can assist in any way, uh, do it.
Yep.
Your ego's gonna feel good, but then there's the other side that your heart is gonna feel fuller, and it will have been reciprocated for the receiver, whether they were able to acknowledge that or not, or whether they remember it or appreciate it. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. Just the fact that there was an intention there that was positive and compassionate is enough.
Well, and I think that's a great way to reflect on that situation because for myself, like in my transitions between jobs, there's a huge fluctuation in income, and like birthdays would come up and Christmas would come up, and I'd be stressed, and I'd be like, how am I going to get through this? And like the question comes from somebody who's going through something very similar, and it seems really backwards, but if we are equipped to help others in our times of need, it's going to help us as much or more than what we're helping that other person. So like these times when we feel bad, when we can't buy presents for our family, or when we're eating tuna when we'd rather be eating steak or whatever it is, like it seems so backwards. But if you have the time at your disposal, these are the times when it's most empowering to go and volunteer at the food bank, or if you can share a meal, maybe it's a home cooked meal, but share that with somebody that needs it that day. Like we all have like disposable containers. It's not to say that you have to be out there going to the coffee shop and buying somebody food. You can always like prepare food And if somebody
Mm-hmm.
is really that down and out, I'm sure they'll happily receive it, just like you and your soup, which is, yeah, it's very, very backwards. It's like we should be the ones getting help, but when we're able to give help in those times, that can be very uplifting because it helps build us at our core, and everything goes from inside out. How we treat others is how they respond to us, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to piggyback off of that, if one can't afford to buy presents or buy food or whatever, just one's time and effort invested in showcasing or acknowledging someone else, uh, that's enough, especially for those who reciprocate and care about you. So, yeah, we have to take a little bit of pressure off of ourselves to try to uh, follow the status quo of what the consumerism, especially that exists around the holidays or this time of the year.
It's so true, and I mean, like with the wonderful age of YouTube and all the do-it-yourself things, like a person can go grab a pallet and make a nice bench for somebody, or they can showcase their skills. Like some of us, like for people who teach music lessons, they can offer music lessons to someone as a gift, and like that's something that is otherwise valued with a monetary, like something tied to it monetarily, and so you're offering that. That's still just as much as a gift as a gift card to Best Buy would be. And I think we forget that each of us bring value in all kinds of different ways aside from the latest Apple TV or the latest brand new PlayStation.
Right. There you have it.
So my last question for you to keep us on track for time is, I've asked you this question before, but I want to see if it's changed in the time that's passed since. And I'm going to try and not use the word authentic. If
You
you,
can.
I
I
know, I
understand.
know.
I understand what you mean. I just want to challenge it.
Oh yeah. If you had one piece of advice on how to live your life in the most powerful way, what would that piece of advice be? And like we're talking about making somebody feel empowered and fulfilled and with purpose in their life.
Yeah, I forget what I said last time, so I'm going to just let that go.
Yeah, that's okay.
I would say to allow yourself to experience every single moment without holding on to that experience. And at the same time, holding space for the the part of you that either wants to enjoy it or uh, or suffer through it. An example of this, is simply, uh, let's say you're going somewhere that you've been in the past, and you know that after you've been there, uh, it's usually a good memory. But during, it maybe doesn't feel like you remember it was. To ahead of time anticipating into it or in the moment, just realizing that this is the thing that you're actually going to remember and it's going to feel good or fulfilling, or this is the thing you're going to remember, which maybe wasn't that good, but wasn't that big of a deal. And being able to hold space like that is very powerful. So, back to where I started, it's living life in a way where you allow yourself to experience what's happening right now, regardless of what it is. That's it.
That's perfect. That is perfect. So thanks for joining me for the second episode in a row.
Yeah, thank you. So stoked. I'm so glad I got to be a return guest.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
It means a lot that you stick it out to listen to each episode of the Lifestyle Chase, especially for these opportunities that I get to bring back a guest to really dive down the rabbit hole, to talk about specific topics and not just about them as a whole. And so, if you enjoyed this episode in particular, I would highly encourage you to help a brother out and go on to iTunes or Apple and give a rating, give a review, perhaps share the podcast on your social media. It always helps a lot. And I know I say it, it's redundant, we hear it all the time, but it means a lot. I can't thank you enough. It's always really cool to actually have like quick chats or conversations with people who are listening, because otherwise, as a podcast host, you're kind of in the dark. I'm going to leave a trailer for my new project coming out in 2020, and rest assured, this podcast will always be the same. We're just kind of adding on more talking. We're adding on additional little side projects, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, so I'm just hoping that you're as excited as I am. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Real Talk by The Lifestyle Chase. This is a daily, community-supported, 12-minute podcast that complements The Lifestyle Chase while targeting specific topics each day. Let's begin.